It's going to do it this morning. It doesn't like me. I heard that. Oh, me. You know, it was interesting being away last week. I thoroughly enjoy being with our family here, and I hated being away. Had a couple of things that I thought were kind of humorous that I thought I'd share with you. As we were preparing to go through the gate, or the area where they can search you if they need to, had two things happen to me. Put my bag on the conveyor belt so it'd go through. It goes through. Of course, I only had one bag. I had a backpack that had all my clothes in it and everything. And it goes through and it stopped. And the lady looks at me as I'm on the other side and she says, "You got a CPAP machine in this?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Okay, we needed to take that out." And I was like, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that." So if you ever travel by plane, note that if you carry a CPAP and it's with you on the carry-on, you have to take it out of the bag. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But the second funny thing was, as I go through, they've got it now to where you stand. You don't just walk through a metal detector anymore. They actually do a scan of the body. And so I go through this scanner, and there's something showing up on my ankle in the scan. And I'm thinking, okay, what do I have down there on my ankle beside my sock? And so he goes and he has to pat my leg down to make sure there's nothing, there. And he says, he's good. And I looked and I told my friends, because they were like, only you would get caught by that. And I said, hey, the only thing I can figure is that my sock kind of got bunched up at my ankle, and that's the only thing, because I wasn't carrying anything. And so it was just kind of humorous. Didn't have those experiences on the way back because I knew to take my CPAP out of my bag, and I knew, to make sure everything was ready when I went through the scanner. But it was really interesting. Had a great opportunity. I missed y'all. I'll say that straight out. I missed y'all. This morning, we're going to look at Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 as our launching off point. We are going to be looking at so great a cloud. Have you ever thought about those that have gone on before and the things that they had to go through? We look at the historical figures, and we can understand guys like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, and we can get a mental picture of some of the stuff because we have videos, or not videos, but photos of the environment that they were in and of the things that were going on in their life. And we had all these great things going on. And it was really neat to be able to see these pictures. Of course, granted, during George Washington times, it's more of paintings that we have than it is of the photos. But you understand what I'm saying. But what about Moses? What about Daniel? What about these men such as Adam? What do we think about with these individuals? In my life, I've had several people that have made an impact on who I am. One was the man that I called Dad. He was actually my stepdad, but he made an impact on my life. He was there when I needed someone. He was there to talk with me and to listen to me. It didn't matter whether or not he agreed with me, he would talk with me. One of the greatest statements I ever heard that man say was, "It doesn't matter if you want to be a garbage man, I will support you in whatever you do." You see, we have individuals in our life that make those type of comparisons. One such man that has made an impact on my life, we've asked to be in your prayers. That's Steve Higginbotham. I can only imagine sitting in the doctor's office when he heard those words that everyone dreads. It's just 3 words, but we hate them. And that's why, as soon as I saw it, it shocked me. Steve has been a great mentor to me, and I ask that you will continue to keep him in your prayers. He and I have known each other since he was preaching in Glasgow, Kentucky, and I was in Cave City. And we have formed a great bond and a great friendship, and I've enjoyed having that. He probably doesn't know that. If he sees this video, then he's now going to know that the impact that he's made in my life was one of true change that has helped me. So why do I start off this way? Because we need to understand how great we have it. You know, saw a meme, if you know what a meme is, for those of you that don't, it's little pictures that they put with little statements on it, usually found on Facebook or Twitter or granted, you're all looking at me if you don't use those going, what? But that's okay. And it was really humorous because it had two of my favorite characters in one of my favorite shows, and that was the original series of Star Trek. And it had Captain Kirk and it had Spock as they were, I don't know if those of you that followed Star Trek remember the episode where they go through the time portal and it's like a little round thing there and they go through it and it shows them going through it. It says, hey, we're going to travel back to 2020. And then 5 minutes later, you see them jumping back through and it says, nope, that was a bad idea. But isn't that how we view this year? This has been a bad year, hasn't it? I mean, think about all the issues we face. Think about all the problems that have occurred. Think about all the things that are going on. And we're just a little over halfway through the year. We've had 2 hurricanes hit the country in the almost same spot. And it seems like whether it's the COVID or whether it's the riots or whether it's the protests or whether it's the unrest overseas or whether it's there's always something we're looking at and we're going, oh, this is so bad. Can we just stop this and start this year over? I don't know about you, but I don't want to start the year over. But wouldn't it be great to be able to look at it and say we can pull something from it? We can. I want to read verses 1 and 2 of Hebrews chapter 12. And I want us to read what's here and understand it. Notice what the writer of Hebrews says. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily entices or ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Did you see those words? Did you form the picture that is seen in those words? What an amazement we have. I want us to look at these things that we have. Look at these so great a cloud of witnesses. All right, I mentioned a couple of guys earlier. I'm going to mention them again as we think about it, and I'm going to add to them. You have Moses, and you have Daniel, you have Peter, and you have Paul. And you know what we do? We look at these men and we put them up here, and we say, oh, look how great these guys. I could never be. Do we forget that Moses lied? Do we forget that Peter denied? Do we forget that Paul persecuted? We could add men like Elijah, Elisha, Hosea, Amos, Jonah, who ran, David. all of these men were like you and I. All of these men had issues in life. All of these men fell short somewhere in that life. But yet we put them up here and think how great they were and that we could never amount to what they were. I can almost guarantee you these same men probably said the same thing in their mind about someone else. Moses probably said, I'll never amount to what Isaac and Abraham were like. Daniel probably thought, I could never be what Joshua was. Peter became fearful and started sinking in the middle of a storm after he had just walked on water. They were just like you and me. They had their issues in life. Daniel had been taken into captivity. Paul was beheaded after being imprisoned. Moses was fearful of the people, but yet led them into the wilderness and had to lead them through the wilderness because they refused to obey God. In fact, ask God, can't we just destroy them and start all over? Right after he took up for them. Lord, you can't do this. You can't destroy these people, because if you do, then nobody's going to follow you because they're going to be so afraid of you. But you know what each one of them helps us with? Look at the faith of these men. Moses held up his rod, and the Red Sea parted, and the ground was dry, and Israel walked across it. Daniel refused to give in to the decree of praying only to the king, and was thrown into a lion's den and survived the night because God was there. Peter, after denying Christ, had Christ talk to him and say, Peter, I love you. Paul, while on the road to Damascus to do harm to God's people, talked to the Lord and was taught by him. Their faith sticks out over and over again. Our faith can stick out throughout everything we've been going through this year. Through the COVID, knowing that God will take care of us. Through the protests, knowing that God is in control. Through the riots, realizing that this life is not as important as the next life. Through the civil unrest, whether or not the economy is going to tank, we don't have to worry about these things. Someone asked me my opinion over a lot of political things, and I told them this exact answer. My opinion really does not matter. Now think about what that statement means. It doesn't matter what I believe or what I expect or what I think, because the only one that matters is Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And if we hold on to that, and we live that life that He has asked of us, we are surrounded by these men that we hear and read about in the Scriptures, because their lives are that great in our mind and in our eyes. And one day, we're going to have people look back at us. No, I'm not talking about presidents and ambassadors and dignitaries. I'm talking about our children and our children's children and our children's children's children. I'm talking about the ones that really matter in this world. And what are they going to see? Are they going to see our faith and stand with us? Because that's what's important. These monuments and these flags that everybody's all bent out of shape for, they're going to be destroyed in the twinkling of an eye. The historical value of all the things that people are trying to get rid of, it doesn't matter when it comes to the cross. Because we are either with God or we are against God. And that's what's important. Who won the World Series in 2009, 1919, 1864? All these things don't matter. But our salvation does. In verse 1, we learn that we need to get rid of sin and doubt. And we need to hold on to truth and salvation. Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 through 14 reiterate that. Get rid of sin. Get rid of doubt. Am I a good enough Christian? I remember hearing someone once say, if I only make heaven by just my toenail, I'll be happy. Newsflash. We're not going to make heaven by our toenail. We're either going to make heaven or we're not going to make heaven. Period. I understand what they're saying. But if we're that concerned about whether or not we're just going to make it in, maybe we need to change some things about our life to know that there is no doubt where we're headed. Because that's what it's about. Jesus didn't come and die on a cross for us to have doubt and to have fear. He came and He died on a cross to take away that fear and that doubt and that sin. We don't have to worry about it. He goes on in verse 2 and he talks about Christ as who we are looking for. And we need to seek Him. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 6 teaches us that faith is diligently seeking God. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, I'm looking. I hear people all the time, well, I hope I'm a good Christian. You either are or you're not. We need to stop using crutches about everybody else. Well, I'm better than they are. That's not why Christ died. By the way, if you've not heard me say this, if you're comparing your Christian life to someone else, you're comparing it to the wrong person. Because the only one we should be comparing our Christian walk with is Christ. Period. Because we're always going to be better than others. And others are always going to be better than us. But the only one that matters is whether or not we match up with Him in whom we believe and are persuaded that He is able. And if we believe that, and if we believe that we're able to do and be what God desires of us, it doesn't matter what the world thinks. Because the world will not defeat God. Oh, they think they have. Oh, we took God out of classrooms. Oh, we took God out of the public view. No, you haven't. And one day they will find out just exactly how far wrong they were. God is still in control. We need to allow Him to work with us. And we need to be seeking Him every day of our life. Striving to be the best we can be. Not worrying whether or not Joe is doing it right and if we're better than Joe's doing or Amy or Richard or anybody else. You can fill in the blank there. Stop looking at other people to determine how good a Christian we are and start looking at the source. Because that's what it's about. Diligently seeking Christ. Or have you not read the last part of the last letter that we have from Paul as he's writing to Timothy? For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. And not to me only, but also to all who have loved His appearing. You don't see Paul comparing himself to people. He says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Because he looked at himself and he looked at his life and he knew where he was. What type of company can we really say we're in? Verse 2 goes on to say that He is seated at the right hand of God. Colossians chapter 3 verses 1 through 4 say the same thing. He is seated at the right hand of God. Who is? Christ is. Why? Because that's where He is. And He has eyes all over the place. And He knows who's His and He knows who isn't. He knows it. We don't have to question. We don't have to guess. We don't have to act like we know what's going on. We can know. Somebody once asked me, they said, do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are going to heaven? And I said, yes, I do. And they said, how do you know that? And I said, because I've been obedient to Jesus. And I've done what He's asked. And I love Him who died for me. That's what John's talking about as you read through the letter that he wrote in 1 John. We can know that we are saved. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to question it. Talking to an individual, that exact subject came up. And I asked him, I said, do you know? He says, I hope I am. That hope, by the way, he was given was not the hope of knowing. It was the hope of wishy-washy. Not quite sure. Praying for the best outcome. We can this day decide what we're going to do. Larry, if you're capable, can you pull up Joshua 25 for me? I'll give you, you can't? If you can't, that's fine. I'm about to read from Joshua 25. Y'all know where I'm going over here, don't you? Because it's important for us to understand who we are. It's important for us to understand what we are. And Joshua gives us that information. I may be wrong. I said 25. 24 is what I'm looking for. That's what happens when you ad-lib at the last second, isn't it? If I can get 24 to pull up. All right. Look at verse 15 of Joshua 24. Just look at what Joshua tells the children of Israel as they're getting ready to go in. And they've already taken the land. And now they're ready to possess it and to own it. And look what he says. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Take note of what he said in that first one. If it seems evil to serve God. You see, people say it's evil to serve God. And so they've turned to themselves and they worship themselves. And they worship their thoughts and their ideologies and their understandings and the things that they want and the things that they desire. That's what they serve. That's what they're worshiping. But you and I have a choice. And our choice comes down to who we're going to serve. I can't answer for you, but I can answer for me. And I answered the same way Joshua did. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. As a father, I've always been afraid. Always been afraid. I'm afraid I'm going to make the wrong decision. I'm afraid I'm going to do the wrong thing. I'm afraid I'm going to make these great errors that are going to influence my children and cause harm to them in the ways that they grow up. I don't know if I ever told y'all this, but I'm very proud of my boys and what they're becoming. I don't normally do that. I don't normally boast about those things. And although Josh is now finding out that college has stress, I'm proud of him. I'm proud of him for deciding to go in the direction he's wanting to go. I'm proud of him. But I'm not surprised. Because as a young child, I would hear him say, I want to be like my dad. They had a day where the parents were invited as the kindergartners, or pre-Ks, I should say, were getting ready to graduate pre-K and everything at the school Josh was going to. And they had them all lined up. And they were going through each child. And they asked the child, what do you want to be when you grow up? And all the kids were, I want to be a doctor. And I want to be a lawyer. And I want to be a baseball player. And I want to be a pilot. And I want to do this. And we had a great variety of things. And they got to Joshua about halfway through it. And they asked him, what do you want to be? And his exact words, I want to be a daddy. And everybody that was around us all went, "Aw." I knew what he meant. And that kind of made me feel even better. He meant he wanted to be like me. But you know what I have to do? I have to step up to the plate. And I have to be ready to do what needs to be done. And I have to make sure that the example I'm leaving for my children is the example God left for me. And when I fail, of which I do quite often, I need to make sure that they understand that I failed. Because God is, and always will be, in control. So what decision do you and I make today? If you're not a Christian, I plead with you. There is nothing better than knowing that you are headed into heaven. And you can do that if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God. If you're willing to repent and change your life. If you're willing to confess Him before men. If you're willing to be immersed for the remission of your sins. You can do that today. For those of us that are Christians, if we're not living it, we can do something about it. We can get our lives right through prayer and confession of sin and repentance. Will you let us help? Will you answer that invitation? Will you step out and come forward right now? While together we stand and sing this invitation song.